Whoops, okay. Slow motion train wreck. Here we go. Hold on, I'm just making sure. So it is. Let me get that off of there. There we go. I don't want anything to come between us, Jim. So it looks like the live stream is actually just a few seconds behind, but like I'm watching it on my phone.
Okay.
So we are live. All right, because I couldn't figure out, there has to be a way or some software or something where like, you can see comments like as we're talking and all that kind of stuff, but I can't do it on my laptop. So I thought I would just like start the second screen here in case anyone actually watches. I also want to make sure this doesn't give us any feedback. So I'm going to turn the volume all the way down. Okay. So where are you now? Are you in the Northeast or are you still in Florida?
I am back.
Or would you prefer not to say because you're a man of mystery?
Yes. And
yes, a man of mystery.
There's a little feedback that's making me sound like Darth Vader. Do you hear that?
No.
Okay.
You sound fine over here.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay. The volume got turned up again. All right. Speak.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay. So Andy and I got together a couple of years ago when he was taking shots at me for my giant show. And I found him to be, he's a pain in the ass, but I found him to be objective and reasonable and interested in the subject, whatever he thinks of it. So I called him up and I, discussed some things he had said, some points he had made that I found were, compelling and interesting. And we've been going back and forth for a while. And, I think one of the most important things we can do is offer context about the dynamics in these debates or these subjects that are controversial. And you have sometimes entrenched skepticism that doesn't really that views everything from the alternative side as like you're living in your mother's basement and you're watching QAnon videos. When there's a lot of freaks and snake oilers out there and con artists, but there's also some very intelligent researchers who are making some strong cases. And on the other side, there's this idea that the scientific and academic world is involved in vast conspiracies, which people don't know how academia works. They make these bold and wide sweeping claims, and they try to lump together like real conspiracies, like intelligence agencies running drugs and the Panama Papers into this octopus. So the debates go nowhere. And I feel like if you have a real case, I have many friends from different academic disciplines and I present them with different problems and ideas and we go back and forth. And that's what I think, we want to do here. Explain these dynamics, explain that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and talk about specific things like today we're going to talk about the Dragon Man skull and the idea of giants, and so I feel like everybody will hate us because every time I say anything objective, the skeptics don't care and the true believers call me a sellout. So I'll let you take it from here.
You can't win. Everybody hates me already anyway. So, I mean, what have I got to lose? Seriously.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of chewed over the rationale for it before, I obviously think it's worth a shot. So here we are. We decided for the first quote unquote episode that we would talk about the Dragon Man skull. So this is a relatively new one. It was found back in the 30s, but was only published last year, right? 2021.
Yes.
So, I did a lot of physical anthropology when I was at Michigan. I taught it intro level at Grand Valley and at South Carolina, but I haven't kept up with it that much over the last few years. So I had to read up on the Dragon Man skull a little bit. So I did. The report is open access, which is great. It summarizes it in a few pages, and then it's got like 250 pages of supplemental material. So it's got every measurement, every detail that you could ever want on this thing. So it's pretty incredible. It's a really, really complete cranium, no mandible. the reason I think that you mentioned it twice, which is why we picked it for the topic. You know, when we were just kind of kicking around ideas, you're like, yeah, Dragon Man skull, yeah, Dragon Man skull. So I can tell Jim that you really want to talk about the Dragon Man skull. So, so I watched a video. It was your boy Hugh Newman and
Andrew
Collins.
Collins.
Andrew Collins. Yeah, so Collins did most of the talking. So it was interesting because I think that this is what happens a lot that kind of drives people like me just a little bit nuts. You start from the facts. So he's talking about the skull, going through the backstory of the skull, what it is, and then from there, how that skull fits into various things. Just you kind of keep having to kind of take these leaps, you know, that are, or these steps that are kind of always dependent on the one before you. And so by the time you get to the end, you've got the Denisovans colonizing North America and riding around on horses and all this other kind of stuff. You know, and the starting point for that discussion was the Dragon Man skull, which is a real thing. So I think it's really interesting to kind of follow that logic, but I get lost pretty early on in that narrative. You want to add to that before we kind of get into it?
Well, the backstory of this. Well, first of all, the Denisovans are human cousins that were found in 2010 in the Altai region of Siberia. They mated with humans and Neanderthals. They found some teeth actually, and the teeth were so large they thought they were cave bear teeth, and they took them to the Max Planck Institute and got them sequenced, and they found out that they were actually, part of like the Melanesian population, and other populations have a couple percentages of Denisovan in them. And I think they gave humans the high altitude gene as well in the Himalayas. So, anyways, there were this mystery, and they had this complex carved piece of jewelry. So it's like, who are these people? They seem very sophisticated, and the evidence at the time was scarce, but it started to add up. Like, are these particularly large individuals? There was the penguin man jaw found in Taiwan, and another jawbone that I think is Denisovan found in the Tibetan plateau that paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer also looked at and said was rather large. So, anyways, in 1933 in China, they found a skull that was very large. Chris Stringer said it's the largest Homo skull he's ever encountered, and he's seen a lot. And it was hidden in a well by a Chinese farmer because it was under Japanese occupation. Then I think it was in 2018, on his deathbed, the farmer told his son about it. He got it out of the well. He took it to the University of Beijing, and I think Chris Stringer was part of the research team along with anthropologists from the University of Beijing. Now they called it Homo longi, which is dragon in China, a new species, quote unquote. And I don't think Stringer thinks that, and I think we all think it's a Denisovan skull, the elusive Denisovan skull, and it's in great shape, like you said. So that's the backstory to it. And I'll give my take that when you spin a story that you're trying to prove, you can step out on a ledge. Scientists don't do that as much because they're kind of like, let's start from the facts. And I will say, myself, I patch in pieces with intuition or esoteric sources sometimes. And I can't claim that, I have all the answers. And if I make those claims, I'm full of shit. But I think these narratives can spread out. And I will say that it's good to be challenged because uninterrupted, if you heard me for 5 hours in a row, you'd say, this guy makes such a compelling argument.
I think I have heard you for 5 hours in a row.
Which is partially true. I'm very intelligent and compelling. But the point is that you want a back and forth, and you want to deal with experts in the field and create an opinion. I just don't think there's a lot of that. And the dynamics, I will say that, I don't want to get too tangential here, but there's a new paper out about James Lawrence Powell about premature rejection of science regarding the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And Pinter and Ishman were the two skeptics. Well, anyways, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is this idea that a cataclysm hit Earth about 12,000 years ago. And it's basically been verified by science now. But at the time, these skeptics came out and they used a lot of hyperbolic language and not a lot of evidence. And there was peer reviewers that should have picked up on that. They called it a Frankenstein creation, said it was like UFOs, and likened it to pathological science. So my point there is, sometimes I think academia views these mythological ideas as like, oh, that's a win for the freaks. Let's really make sure we rip that idea apart. So I think there's a little blame, if you will, or shortcomings on both sides. But the problem with the alternative side is there's no peer review, and there isn't a vested interest in outing yourself, if you will, and discussing these matters. It's better to throw red meat to the true believers. And I'm kind of like, that's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, one of my favorite professors that I had at Michigan, Milford Walpoff, he used to say, science is a human endeavor. And he's absolutely right about that. People, all this, like, just the facts, let the facts speak for themselves. Another thing he would often say is like, you let the facts speak for themselves. He's like, I've been in rooms full of skeletons and none of them have ever said a single word. Like they don't speak for themselves. It always takes humans to interpret and evaluate, and humans evaluate each other. They say nasty things to each other. They get very entrenched in what they think is correct. They build careers around certain ideas. They don't like to see them knocked down. If you've been at the top of your game for a long time, you've taken a lot of fire. People come out of the ends of their careers and they've been through the ringer. So it's not like everybody's walking around in lab coats with their clipboards, making all the perfect judgments all the time. Like, that's not how science is done. It's pretty messy. And I read that Powell article that you're talking about. We haven't talked about Dragon Man at all here yet, but it was good because I think a lot of archaeologists think that the Younger Dryas impact stuff is a bunch of baloney. And like, I know some of the people who are working on that, and they're not idiots. A lot of the technical stuff is not something that I feel like I can independently evaluate. I can't go out and look for the microspherules under a microscope and identify them. Like, I have to trust that somebody somewhere is doing that correctly. So I feel like I haven't made a final judgment yet on how strong I think that case is. One problem now, and we should talk about this, is like, there's all kinds of impact papers coming out. One came out, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, just a few days ago, saying that the Hopewell experienced a airburst comet strike over the Ohio Valley. And like, I looked at it and like, man, I don't know. There's a lot of independent lines of evidence. There's lots of ways this could be falsified, but some of it just like didn't make sense to me right off. It almost seems like there's a popularity aspect now to comets hitting things. You probably saw the Sodom and Gomorrah paper that came out last year. So, on one side, I think it's true that scientists do tend to like maybe just kind of gang up on something and dismiss it. But on the other side, like, this whole idea that impact strikes happen frequently and that they can change things, like, people are rolling with that. Like, there's all kinds of papers coming out on that stuff. So it's not so cut and dry that a bunch of people in lab coats are saying it couldn't happen or whatever. So I think that you just have to let those battles kind of play out, and time will tell. Yes, sir. Your turn.
Yes, thank you. I like analogies, and I look at it like the medical field to me is like how anthropology and archaeology and geology are. It's you really got to be conservative. You got to move slow. There are ideas like, I found that were dismissed for a long time, like the effectiveness of psilocybin. Johns Hopkins is doing many experiments with people, who have terminal illness or in hospice, and it's really helping them, and DMT and all these things that are rewiring the brain. And it just took a while to get there. And it's just like, you have allopathic medicine, but now it's complementary medicine. Ideas like yoga and meditation and things like that are taking hold, and science is being able to verify how they change the brain, impact on physiology and things like that. So it's not that like, oh, big pharma wants none of this and the octopus is disallowing the information. It's more, it just takes time. And that's kind of what I'd like to see in science, because I'm driven by my strange investigations because I spent so much time with wisdom keepers, like real ones like Hopi and Zuni elders and shamans in the rainforest, and I've read through Sumerian tablets and things like that. And I really think there's this kind of strange case for a lost world, if you will. At least I'm open to the idea, and that's why I'm always like drawing in scientists to evaluate. I have a friend who is an astrophysicist who is an expert in orbital calculations, looking at the constant of Nineveh that was found on a cuneiform tablet to see if it's legitimate or not, because it was like a UFO guy who claimed it was in the 70s, and I'm not taking his word. So I drag in a scientist, but I'm really that's the way I look at this. It just takes time, and people get frustrated. But you got to understand, you can't go to the doctor and expect them just to get on board with some alternative, substance that you claim is effective. So to me, that's why I like these ideas. And that being said, do you want to give your opinion on what you think about the Dragon Man skull and what the implications are?
Sure. So everybody wants it to be Denisovan, right? We don't have any genetics from the Dragon Man skull yet. It would make sense, totally makes sense with like the timing, with like other stuff that's around there, with like the size of it. It's big metrically. Like if you look at the supplementary material in that paper, they graph Dragon Man skull versus all these others and all these different dimensions and angles and whatever. And it's often like right at the very edge in terms of its size. It's not biggest in all dimensions, however. For one, the cranial capacity is, it's within human range. We're not talking about something that has an extremely large brain. What we're talking about is a skull that is large, but it's also like really, really massively built. There is a screen sharing thing. Let me see if I can just like throw a video up here real quick. It wants me to share my whole screen. Stop sharing video folders. This is going to be a nightmare. Here we go. Here's some. All right, so there it is. You see the big, huge brow ridge, forehead, slopes back kind of horizontal. The skull, the lines on the back are the attachment for the neck muscles. Those are called nuchal lines, really powerful. Let me get out of here. Whoops. Okay. I guess what seems to me to be the first kind of point where I think there needs to be like a point of order, you need to kind of hit the gavel, is there's a difference between how tall things are or how there's a difference between size and robusticity. So when physical anthropologists use the word robust, this is a super, super robust skull. They're talking about it's strong, it's powerfully built. We use that in kind of opposition to the word gracile. If you think about the Australopithecines, one of our old human ancestors there, we have the robust Australopithecines and we have the gracile Australopithecines. The robust ones have, big facial muscles, big, huge grinding teeth, real strong muscle attachments. The gracile ones are much more delicately built. It doesn't necessarily say anything about their size. The robust Australopithecines are about the same height. We know because we have postcranial bones as the graciles. And it turns out, if you look like across some of these early, human ancestors and species and things like that, the robustness or the largeness of the skull doesn't necessarily correlate to body size. So that's like the first problem for me. We don't have any big sections of postcranial bone from the Denisovans. Like if we had a big femur, you could say something about stature. Neanderthals have really big heads with big brains, real well-muscled faces. Male Neanderthals average about 5'5". If you look at the skulls and you hold it up to one of, a modern human skull, you're thinking, man, this guy must have been a real bruiser. And he might have been. He might have had a very strong, powerful torso, but he wasn't necessarily tall. So that's one of those things. Like I'm going to be from Missouri. It could be that the Denisovans were 6.5, 7 feet tall, but until we find some postcranial bones, there's really a lot of reasons to suspect that that's not the case. And so you sent me some other postcranial bones from other things, and so I looked into those. But you have your hand up and I have talked. So go.
Yeah, no, I'm not hanging my hat on it. Oh, this is proof of a race of giants, and Nephilim are coming to get us. It's. I just thought it was intriguing that it's kept going in that direction. Large molars, large jawbone, large skull, and we'll see. For somebody who is not skilled in anthropology, you need the large bones. You need more evidence. Todd Desitel, we had him on a show, and I've talked to him a lot about these things, and I sent Andy a couple cases like Disitel actually talked about wanting to discuss Heidelbergensis with Lee Berger from South Africa. Now, Lee Berger is this well-known anthropologist who found Homo naledi at the Rising Star Cave in South Africa. They did a Nat Geo special on it where they had to hire female spelunkers because it was so tight. And it was an Australopithecine find, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Are you following? Let's see here. And okay,
go ahead.
And so Lee Berger claimed in an interview that he encountered, Homo heidelbergensis bones that was 7 foot and taller, and that was an interesting claim. And I know that femur you're showing is only like half a femur. But he made that claim, and he's well respected. And I wanted to get Andy's take on that, as well as Abel Sam Vakua in the Republic of Georgia. He was a well-known evolutionary biologist, I believe, an anthropologist, taught at the North Texas University, and was part of the Dmanisi Homo erectus find from like 1.3 million years ago. And he has bones in his possession in the 90s, and he's doing an interview where he claims that they were like 8 foot tall. So, and then there's a giant of Castelnau. And I just want to get your take on these different finds to see if they have any validity or not.
Yeah. So the Berger one, as far as I could tell, that bone is still not published. That proximal femur that was in that picture there.
Yeah.
You can tell it's huge, right? It's big, thick, whatever. But as you very astutely pointed out, Jim, it's not the whole bone. So it's possible that it is a very, very robust femur that is actually about the size of a normal human femur, because that happens. And there are other examples from like a similar time period. The Middle Pleistocene goes from like 780,000 to 120,000 or so years or so ago. And so there's all kinds of bones that date to that time period. And a lot of them are pretty robust. There's another paper published on a similar femur where they go back and forth, and I can send you the link to it, or I can send you the paper. They go back and forth about, looking at the robustness of it, like how big it is, and then trying to extrapolate what that means as far as the size of the whole bone. And it's not simply like, here's a big femur head, therefore the whole bone was big. It could just be a bone that's very, very thick because the individual is really powerful, but not necessarily exceptionally tall. So those are out there. They're real. What was the guy's name you just mentioned? See a Russian picture with
Abel Sam Vakua.
Let me find that picture and put it up real quick.
Let me say something for a second here. Carl wants to know what esoteric source means from Jim. I've read like apocryphal books like the Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, the Popol Vuh, the sacred Maya Kichi text, oral traditions, native myths and legends. I study Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner, and try to, Cayce has a lot of interesting claims that are starting to come true. Like they just found 23,000-year-old footprints in New Mexico with grass seed embedded in them. So that's a real, new find that's very interesting. So I'm open to those ideas, but I don't lead with those ideas, In fact, I think Carl, I don't know what his area expertise is, if he's into Middle Eastern art or something like that. But I read one of his papers because I'm always looking for these androgynous gods in the iconography, and he seemed to have some in a paper that he wrote. But anyways, that's, like I said, I am willing to go anywhere for a good story, and to look at I've spoken at the Casey Foundation several times. I find his stuff interesting. Greg Little writes about Casey stuff too, and I find him, very bright and interesting as well. So let's see. Just want to make sure I was on the same page. I was thinking the same. Okay. Anyways, thank you, Carl.
We got our first comment. Yay, Carl.
And it's not a curse. All right, back to you. Oh, I was going to make a Jeffrey Toobin joke, but I won't. Sorry.
You can if you want. There's only 3 people watching.
Okay,
so
good. Maybe people will watch after because, yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen so we can see this picture that you sent me. Boy, this screen sharing thing is really clunky here. There he is. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So he's holding up what looks like a pretty good size femur. He's got what looks like a distal bottom part of another femur in his left hand. He's got a skull with a mandible sitting on the table. With nothing for scale is the problem. Like, maybe this guy's 4.5 feet tall. I don't know. And another thing I noticed, like, that does not look like a Middle Pleistocene, like Denisovan-like skull to me. That looks like a modern human skull. There's no big brow ridges. It's got, a notch in the maxilla there. So it looks like it could be a really tall individual, but like I don't really know what to make of it other than that because there's nothing like to measure its size with. So that was my impression of that one. I've seen the pictures before.
Yeah, it can be interesting, but not solid. Like I know, please somebody use a tape measure one of these days if you're going to take a picture with a bone that you claim is giant. And I will say this is a very frustrating topic because I can show, iconography around. If I'm trying to make this case, I love fish gods and androgynous gods and these myths of like these strange beings showing up all around the world. But I can show iconography. I can show, literally from the Sumerian documents, from the temple walls of Edfu, the building texts, and the same on the other side of the ocean. I can show lots of information. The giant story, there's lots of great myths and legends and petroglyphs with 6 fingers and toes that are huge all around the world. And the Bible talks about the giant of Gath with 6 fingers and toes. And, I have not DNA tested the 10-foot skeleton. And I think a strong case has been made that there was definitely like a shamanic or royal class of Native Americans. We have in the 50s and 60s anthropologists like Don Dragoo, Webman Snow in Kentucky, John Lang, was it Benthal in 1965 at the DeSoto Cave. You can go to Wikipedia and find that he unearthed an over 7-foot skeleton with a massive jawbone and then reinterred it as part of the Nagpur laws. So, I think there's this case that there was this royal class, like amongst the Adena maybe, and with powerful jaws. And, but the idea of like biblical giants and, I have not seen the evidence. I find it a fascinating subject. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I got no skin in the game. And I got friends who are like Mormons and Christians and they're into it, but they're not always objective because like, oh, if it's in the Bible, it's true. And I'll say, yeah, go read Leviticus. It says, adulterers and homosexuals and wizards should be put to death. Is that true? So, I'm not an a-hole, but I try to be objective and, give weight to these different, documents, but not overvalue one over the other. So I think it's healthy to, come from that perspective. Now back to you, if you could maybe talk about the Giant of Castleknock case.
So I always thought that one was really, really interesting because there's actual pictures of bones. I have like high school French, so I tried to translate it myself. The thing that always bugged me about it was, again, they're all partial, and the case is made for it to be a really big human based on what they say is a part of the humerus, this bone here. So they've got it like transposed on there. It's like, well, that's how and I'm pretty sure that's how they scale it up. With those grainy black and white photos, though, I've always thought that piece of a humerus might actually be part of a tibia because it doesn't have the whole end on it, which, if you took your tibia is your shin bone. If you took that shin bone and cut off the ends and said, oh, this is actually your arm bone, like, yeah, that would look like a really, really huge person. But like you would be able to tell, if you could actually see those bones, but I don't believe they exist anymore. Am I correct about that? Nobody can find them.
Hugh and I, Darth Vader, Hugh and I went to, yeah, maybe you want to mute yourself when I talk. Hugh and I were in France looking for them. The University of Montpellier doesn't claim to have them. And we couldn't find a private collection for Lepage, the anthropologist. So let me explain this case. In the 1890s, there was a find at the lowest level of a Neolithic burial mound in Montpellier, France. And there's pictures of the bones. It's a femoral midshaft, and like Andy said, like 3 pieces. And it really looks like if you superimpose them on what would be the size of a skeleton, it's enormous. But we were not able to find the bones, which leaves us in the lurch. And I want to add that it was supposedly peer-reviewed by several other anthropologists, and it was determined that it was not a disease condition. It was not pituitary gigantism, which is a tumor on the pituitary gland that causes like out of control growth, like Robert Wadlow in Illinois, who grew to 9 foot tall, but he died when he was 22. It's not acromegaly. But Andy would know better than I. What is the intellectual or what is the capability of an 1890s team of anthropologists? Are they, reaching around in the dark, or is it something that they could have, grasped the find if it was indeed, authentic? Your mute's on.
How are you? I would just let me talk for a while, but you would figure they would know what they're talking about, but people make mistakes too. And there's a lot of wishful thinking. And so that's kind of a good segue. Basically on that one, I don't know. If the IDs on the bones are good and they're not diseased, then yeah, it looks like a really, really big person. But like, I just always thought, what if they misidentified that what they thought was a humerus and it was some kind of other postcranial bone, like a big thick one, like part of the femur or tibia or whatever, which, it's not that difficult to do. Like that's when you learn bones as an anthropologist, like you study and you study and you study until you know them like the back of your hand, because like it's tricky. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So another case of wishful thinking is the Weidenreich one, yes, because so Franz Weidenreich was a scholar who was working in China, who thought that humans had a phase in their evolution that was a gigantic kind of phase. And he was kind of arguing against the notion at the time, which was that, back in human evolution, we were small and then we get bigger. He was saying, no, we were actually bigger and then we've gotten smaller. And I don't really know, I used to know more about him. I don't really know why that idea appealed to him so much, but he thought that the fossil evidence supported it. He had, there's some really big, robust skulls from Indonesia, the Sanggaran stuff. There was some from China. And then he had these gigantic teeth, which he thought were human teeth, which turned out to be Gigantopithecus teeth, which now almost everybody thinks was a kind of basically giant orangutan. They're not in the human line. Like they split off well before that. All that we have of them still is a handful of teeth and I think like 3 or 4 mandibles or something. There's 2 different sizes of Gigantopithecus. There's like a big one and a small one. But anyway, that all that evidence to him seemed to point toward the these big humans back in our lineage somewhere. And he was looking at a lot of the same large bones that are still, they still comprise the fossil record. And yeah, there are big skulls and other things, but the problem is that they're not, for the reason I talked about earlier, they're not necessarily tall. They're very powerfully built, is what we can say about them at this point. Find me the 7.5 foot skeleton of the Denisovan, and then we can talk. But until then,
Luke, I love your father. Sorry, man, I had to do that. How about the idea? We've written, co-author, world-renowned giantologist Hugh Newman and myself, a book on the giants and the mythology of North America and the British Isles. And there's these accounts of giant jawbones fitting over the face, littered in the British Isles and all the United States. And what's interesting to me, not only how many there of them there are, it's just that matter of fact, if you're picking up a jawbone and fitting it over your face, and it's known to be from, a like a Native American burial in context with Native American artifacts, and there's many Smithsonian accounts as well. That to me is interesting. And before that, what are you looking for, your cat? Before that, I'm just kidding. Or you're just bored. One of my beefs is like me, when I first got into this, I was getting steamrolled like I had an eighth grade education. I lived in my mother's basement, where I was an economist first. I've always loved archaeology and anthropology. All my friends, most of my friends are academics, or my neighbor's a physicist, and we talk all day. You may not believe what I have to say or my theories, but I'll say that I do my homework and I'm not a moron. And I got this a bunch of pushback that this whole giant phenomena is just an amalgam of mastodon bones and hoaxes. And I'm just, I am an expert in hoaxes, in newspaper hoaxes and sensationalist headlines. And what I'd push back and say, what I said earlier, is that you get guys like Dragoo and Webb and Snow, respected anthropologists, heads of the Smithsonian Anthropology and Carnegie, talking about rather unusual finds in large jaw bones. And these are finds that are, you clearly Native American, with Native American artifacts in context. Whether they're giant or not, they're not hoaxes. Whether it's faulty regression formulas or incompetence, they're not hoaxes. So you know what I'm saying? That was the point I was trying to make. Like, this is an interesting subject, but the pushback I thought was a little too far because it wasn't like, I don't give a shit about what you think about me. Explain this. Don't you think it's interesting? And you came back with like the double rows of teeth debate, which I said, oh, good, that's a ingenious way to look at this. And I didn't get a lot of that. So that's all I'm saying.
It's my turn now.
Okay, it's your turn.
No, I know you want to talk. You want to talk about the mandible thing. I was looking around not for my cat, but like for an example of, like, I keep drinking out of this glass, this cup, and I was hoping there was another one around there because I wanted to show how two things that have slightly divergent sides that are actually exactly the same size can fit one inside another, which I think probably explains some of that. Like, I think those mandibles probably were large, and I think a lot of the skeletons were big. I don't think they were like, I think that image maybe is used to convey something that is maybe overemphasizes how large they actually were. Yeah.
Many of the accounts are the hands would fit in as well. I know what you're saying, but it wasn't just that. It was like, wow, they were really talking about quite a large jawbone. And I guess maybe to dovetail that in, what is your idea of like the Adena elite? The Adena were these mound builders. Actually, I know you love when I go on a rant, but this is a good opportunity to talk about some of the pseudo history of the United States. And one of the myths was that it was the mound builder myth, that when European colonists showed up, Native American civilizations were very complex. They had incredible mound work in geometric forms that predicted eclipses. And they had like these royal burials and these burial mounds. And basically, it became a racist idea whether to push the natives off their land or for whatever reason, that to claim there was a mythical race that showed up from Europe or Atlantis or wherever and did all the mound building, denigrating the accomplishments of the Native Americans. So you got to understand that is part of the lore of the country and part of the racist paradigm that existed way back when. So you have that mixed in with the giant ethos as well, and you have to be cautious of these things. So sometimes you're interested in the subject, and there's a real dark history to it as well. And so I wanted to throw that out there as well, because you get into the mound builder idea, and a lot of people don't understand the history of it. Anyways, the Adena were these people that appeared to have a royal class that was particularly large. Females possibly over 6 foot tall, males over 7 foot tall. You had said maybe they got more food than the others because they were the royal class. Maybe they were interbreeding. That could be the reason for so many anatomic anomalies like hypodontia or extra fingers or things like that. Whatever the case, I just wanted to get your take. I know you discussed this with Greg Little, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so that was, as after I got on your case when you started your program, I bought a few of the other Giants books that were out there, and they kind of all had the same thing in them. They're all, here's a bunch of newspaper clippings, blah, 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 blah. So I liked Greg's book because I felt like it had a hypothesis in it. It was actually testable, that these things show up greater than we would expect from chance alone, yada, 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 in this population. And so I liked it. And so, he and I are in contact once in a while. Occasionally, he seems like a nice guy. I never met him in person or whatever. But, it's an idea. I think it's hard to test based on what we have for a lot of the reasons that you just explained. Like, there's so much stuff tangled up in those newspaper accounts. Like, those newspaper accounts exist. But if that's the main source of data, that's a tough one, because you do have a lot of sensationalism going on at the time in all kinds of ways. There's tons of examples that don't have anything to do with giant skeletons, of where newspapers were just flat out making stuff up, like, to sell papers. So, like, that current is there. You do have a bunch of people who are out looting these mounds and digging them up and have absolutely no skills, and I don't necessarily trust their firsthand observations of, a guy out there with a horse-drawn plow and a shovel saying, yeah, the skeleton was 8 feet. I just I have a problem with that. And then there are a few kind of mistaken, like, identities or things where people actually did mistake, like, large fossils like mammoths and mastodons for giants. I think we can throw most of those out. Like, that's probably not really contributing that much, but it's out there. There's a lot of religious stuff going on at the time too, with, seeing giants. Like, there's this Giants of Olden Days article that ran in the papers over and over and over again, where they listed all the giants in Europe and all the heights. And I know you've seen it. There's still these memes going around the internet with all, here's the 15 foot, here's the 18 foot. And so people were wanting to find that stuff, and they were wanting those mounds to be evidence of something other than Native Americans. So they were trying to make them different or whatever. So all of this stuff is tangled up in there, and I think it's really hard to disentangle it. Is it possible that the elites of some population were taller than everybody else on average? Sure, that's totally possible, totally plausible. But are they somehow linked to the Denisovans? I mean, their skulls don't look anything like the Denisovans to me. Like, these are, modern humans. There's no, it's hard when you start kind of threading all this stuff together. Like, I get lost pretty quick as you're, like, kind of piling on all these different levels. Like, that's why I got stuck on the double rows of teeth thing, because I felt like that was explainable. And, like, I just watched a presentation of yours from just a couple years ago, and you're still using that one. Like, you're like, oh, the skeptics say it's just a parlance or whatever. But so I know that I have not completely convinced you that the double rows of teeth is kind of linguistic mirage. And there are some cases that are hard to explain with language. Like, I will give you that. But I think a lot of them do go away if you understand, double teeth versus double rows of teeth and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I guess to take my really long answer and to make it really short, like, is it possible? Sure. Do I know? No. Do we have the data to test a hypothesis like that anymore? I don't know that we do. All right, I'll shut up.
Yeah, well, no, I agree with a lot of you said. And frankly, a lot of my focus was on, like, the Smithsonian ethnology reports. There's like 20 accounts of 7 foot and taller skeletons by their own scientists. That's what kind of grabs my attention. In our first book, we wrote about Frederick Cook shows up in Patagonia in the 1890s. Now, we know Drake and Magellan, there were reports of like 8 and 9 and 10 foot giants. And you see the old pictures and things like that. But Cook was there. He was like an explorer and a photographer. And he talked about the Ona people were between like 6 and 7.5 feet tall. And there's a picture of a 6'6" woman. He measured her. I think it was 7'4" or 7'6" male. There's an article about it with photographs. And then they were a victim of genocide by the English troops. So the Ona tribe perished like so many other indigenous people, which, unfortunately, like the Bernie, the Maya codices, we have traditions that we don't know what they were all about. And to me, that blends with this idea of, I understand that the Spanish explorers, the English explorers, are probably average 5'2", 5'3", and the general population of Native Americans was probably like 5'7" to 5'8". But there were all these accounts that were chronicled by De Soto and others. They encountered Tuscaloosa and his son in Alabama, and they described him as like between both over 7.5 feet tall and at least over 7 feet tall. And it just seems that you piece all that together along with the Smithsonian ethnology accounts. And it does seem like there is this royal class of Native Americans, the shamanic class, if you will, that were very tall. I'll just tell a quick story. In Rockingham, Vermont, there was a giant native chief who was known as a fierce warrior, stood over 7 foot tall. When he died, his native brethren buried him with a stone sarcophagus. And when in 1850 they dug up the railroad, they had a blast and they found his grave. And then they remeasured it, and they talked about the jawbone was so massive it fit over the face. So he was known in historical times. He was buried, he was dug up, and he was once again reported, like many of these other counts, to be massive bone structure, massive jawbone, well over 7 feet. So you have accounts like that. And I understand where you're coming from. It's like you can't make claims that you can't back up with evidence. For me, there's a lot of kind of interesting aspects that surround this story, however.
So say there were a lot of people running around that are 7.5 foot tall.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I always come back to like, well, we have people running around now that are 7.5 foot tall.
Yeah.
If you look at like the history of people wanting to believe in giants, like they want giants to be moving the stones of Baalbek. They want giants to be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, so I'm sure a 7.5 foot tall guy can, kick my ass, arm wrestle me down, whatever, but he's not moving the stones of Baalbek either. Like, so like, what does it mean to be a giant? I guess is my question. Like, it's sure tall people are within the range of human variation.
No, gotcha. Well, yeah, I'm pointing out what I believe is an anthropological mystery. Then you get into the idea of if there are a higher occurrence of over 7 footers in the past than in today's general population, what does that mean? And you get into these, more mythical ideas of lost lands and, beings who show up after floods and things like that. And I agree that a lot of the legends around Baalbek and other places are about, they're basically like, if you really know the traditions, the story of giants is really a supernatural one. It is like the gods create the giants and destroy them in a flood. Like the Bible says it, but then you go to Peru and Viracocha, the androgynous god, he creates a race of giants who build Sacsayhuaman and all these other places, and then he creates a flood to destroy them because they become malevolent. And you could say, well, that's, I can't verify that story. But when the Incas when the Spanish showed up at Teotihuacan and in Cusco at Sacsayhuaman, both groups were told by the indigenous people that the Huaris and the giants and the Viracochas built all the crazy stonework because it was so, wild that the Spanish thought they were built by devils, So there are traditions, but I know what you're saying. It's not like, oh, there was a 9'3" guy, so he picked up the stones or whatever. That's more of a mythological idea. And, I'm the one who's like fielding the lunatic fringe oftentimes, and ideas that have no basis in reality. And I try to be polite. People all the time, it's like, oh, I get this artifact and I want you to analyze it. I'm like, I'm not an anthropologist. I said, send it, go to the local university, go to the anthropology, the geology department. And it's always like, no, it'll get lost and they'll send it to Smithsonian and, that kind of stuff. So as an academic, being an academic, I understand the stuff you have to deal with, the crazy ideas you have to deal with, and the kind of the narrative that is woven by sensationalist TV shows that, and I understand, I didn't have full control of my show, but part of it was like this, weaving this conspiracy out there as well. So I understand that academics are annoyed by those ideas. No question about it. What are you laughing at?
Not annoyed. I got a big smile on my face. What are you talking about? What do you got in that orange juice, Jim?
I'm like addicted to OJ. I drink like 2 gallons a day.
You're not like a drinker. I think you had a
No,
beer when you were at my house, but
no, I don't drink. I'm like I've escaped the matrix. I live in a 10 by 15 shack, not a shack, a cabin that I had built and put here on my friend's farm, and I just plug into her basement. I have no possessions. I'm like I've almost reached enlightenment, but
let me send me a telegram when you get there.
yeah, thanks.
So to circle back, like you were interested in talking about the Dragon Man skull. So like, what do you think of it? So let's assume it is Denisovan, and like, do you buy my argument that we can't necessarily assume that it's really tall, and we can't necessarily make a case that any of the stuff that's good in the fossil record is actually really tall?
Yeah, no, I agree that it is. It's compelling. It's moving in a direction that could indicate, that the Denisovans were rather tall and could answer a lot of these questions we have. But like you said, I do understand I've studied the bones of Neanderthals, and I understand that they were very robust, and they even had a larger cranial capacity than modern day Homo sapiens, I believe. But they were average like 5'5". So I'm open to that idea. The thing is, you can't. There's a saying in finance. It's like buy the rumor, sell the news, or something like that. You just can't jump the gun. And personally, I like writing about interesting subjects. I really am a fan of mythology and oral tradition. They don't prove a case, but they oftentimes point you in a direction that's worth following, and then you can see if you can verify it. But yeah, you can only theorize. When you make claims, like solid claims, like this means this and this means that, then you're out on a limb, and I think it's kind of disingenuous, that. And I've been there too. One of the best things you can do in life is admit when you're wrong about anything, and to self-reflect, and to look at both sides of the argument. Because I think people don't understand that algorithms have weaponized everybody's preferences so much that they're living in this world of addicted to outrage and all these weird dynamics where the man has got you down the rat hole. You know what I mean? So it's good to step out, and not in politics, but in other areas of life. It's good to see both sides of people's opinions and talk about those things. So, basically Greg Little, Andrew Collins, Hugh, and myself were like predicting that, we hope there is a Denisovan skull. And when they found it, I bet it's going to be rather large and robust, and so we're going in that direction. And I think it's, and Andrew was great. And Andrew, he wrote about them, that archaeologists would basically find the cradle of civilization before Göbekli Tepe was found in Turkey, in the ashes of, what is it? The Ashes of Angels, one of his early books. So I'm a big fan of Andrew, and he's really got an intuitive ability, and I don't think he would, make these claims. He's like trying to fill in a story by reviewing science and mythology and things like that. But I will say, you cannot prove a case without the evidence. And the Denisovan evidence wasn't covered up by a cabal of anthropologists. Homo floresiensis, when they found hobbits in Indonesia like 20 years ago, that evidence is there for everyone to look at. And that's what people have to understand, because they take like these weird government UFO conspiracy ideas, and they, apply it to science across the board, academia. You see with the whole vaccination thing. I'm not going to tell anybody to get vaccinated or not, but if you look at the body of data, you get a much better chance of not freaking dying if you get vaccinated, and that doesn't mean I'm telling anybody what to do, but you have to be objective. Like, what is your agenda? One of my favorite professors often said, agenda makes you stupid. And if you have an agenda, realize it. Like, oh, I can't like backpedal on this claim because my enemy will win, or I won't, my TV show, I won't get another season, things like that. Because once again, there's no peer review in the alternative universe. But I do think there's some very bright and impressive researchers who have made some really strong points. So my take is you're absolutely right. You need the evidence, but I like discussing these ideas and meeting in the middle. Because quite honestly, I do think over the next 50 years, we will have more finds that might fill in some ideas about a lost world, that, you might say, I'm from Missouri, and I agree. But at the same time, my intuition tells me that there's more to be found. And, like I'll quickly say an idea like the pyramids are 10,000 years old. There's weathering on the Sphinx. Yes, that's interesting, but those aren't a set of artifacts dated to 10,000 BC. You got to understand that what an Egyptologist is going to say. Now, I'm somebody who believes that there's a chance that the antiquity of Egypt or the Egyptian civilization might be much older. But something like weathering in the Sphinx is interesting, and I respect Dr. Robert Schoch, but that's not incontrovertible evidence. That's just kind of a curious thing that has to wait to be joined with more definitive proof.
Yeah. That's why I think to circle back around to Dragon Man again, like I think you guys, and not you, but people who want this to be like the super large Denisovan, like you're just out ahead of your skis a little bit on the body size thing. And like you said, like I mean, the human fossil record has expanded dramatically over the last 20 years. People are going to keep finding stuff, and so there's postcrania out there. Like somebody's going to find a Denisovan femur, and we're going to know it's one because they're going to get DNA from it. We're going to understand the genetics, and then we'll see. We shall see. And the cases from this time period where we do have a lot of postcranial bones, like the Neanderthals or the Cima de los Huesos stuff from Atapuerca in Spain, there's, I don't know, 28 some individuals, and they've got all this stuff like they're normal size people. There's something about the middle Pleistocene, man, that it was rough. Like these folks were tough. They were probably getting up close and personal with really big, dangerous animals a lot of the time. There's a lot of trauma on the skeletons. There was a paper that a couple people did back in the 90s where they compared the pattern of injuries on Neanderthal skeletons to various human occupations. And the one that matched the most with all the head and neck and injuries and everything else was rodeo riders, because they're, getting thrown off animals and all this other kind of stuff. That has been debunked, or they've walked it back a little bit since then. The trauma pattern could match other things or whatever. But if you look at the thickness of some of these skulls and a lot of the blunt force trauma on them and other things about them, they were powerful individuals who were probably getting by a lot using their body strength, and they were built stocky, especially in cold climates, because it conserves heat. We know that about human variability. And the brains were fairly big, but the skull is long, which leads to this sloping forehead. One of the reasons why most modern humans don't have big brow ridges is because those are mechanical formations. When there's no big forehead up here, there's nothing to absorb the down force and the chewing force on your face muscle. So you have to build this big thing of bone, and that's why you see that on a lot of like other primates, chimps, and gorillas. Because it has to do with the forces in the skeleton. You can find people nowadays who do have really big brow ridges. Actually, you might have. Turn sideways. I can't really tell.
Massive cranial capacity.
That's right. No, I guess what I'm saying, there's a lot of stuff that feeds into why they look like they do, and until you find more of the skeleton, like it's hard for me to make a link into the Denisovans are the giants of legend, which is what Collins says. Hey, maybe there's something to it. The whole thing that human myths might record germs of reality and be passed on, and maybe that has to do with the catastrophism, or the Younger Dryas and the flood and all this kind of stuff. Like, I don't discount that. Like that could all be true, but in order to demonstrate that, like you need to have a little bit more evidence for me. Because if it turns out that all these really robust individuals were all shorter than I am, then I'm not going to believe the giants of legend scenario in that case. And if we start getting a lot of data that's true, just like and I'll say one more thing about Gigantopithecus, and then I'll shut up. Like people want to reconstruct this thing as like a 10-foot tall or 11-foot tall ape. You know, if you look at robust Australopithecine teeth, they're way bigger than our teeth, but they were pipsqueaks. They're like 4 foot tall or 4.5 foot tall, but their faces and their mouths are built to have, you know, put these heavy grinding forces on. So tooth size and body size don't correlate across species, and you know, robusticity and stature don't necessarily correlate either. Like if you look at a sample of modern humans and you measure their head circumference, yeah, that actually correlates with how tall they are. But I'm not sure you can do that across these different human groups. And I don't think they're different species, by the way, either, because they're interbreeding. I think they're just different human populations in different parts of the world or whatever. That's a whole nother ball of wax, is species concepts. But so I think that there's an interesting pattern, but like I'm waiting to see the rest of the puzzle pieces before I decide that these guys are really, really tall. I think it's self-evident that they were really, really strong, and that you wouldn't want to meet one in a dark alley and get him ticked off at you. That's for sure. But I don't think that they're walking around 7 or 8 feet tall until you can prove to me otherwise. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree. That you need the long bones. That's why that South African find is so compelling, but we get half the femur bone. And yeah, this is one of these things that, you know, interesting, worthy of investigation, but you have to wait. If you're interested in it, it's just like these ideas ring true. If like you're like me, you're into this idea. You think there's some historical reality to it, but in order for the case to be proved, you need, you know, you need femur bones, long bones. You need DNA testing. You need peer-reviewed articles that discuss where a bunch of scientists get a look at the evidence. And if it is a real phenomenon, it will come, and it will, you know, these things take a long time. That frustrates people. But I really think it's the kind of entrenched attitudes on both sides. Like both sides have somewhat of a beef, you know, like there's a little too much. Everything from the alternative side is fringe and crazy, and everything from the academic side is like, you know, a conspiracy or whatever. So that then you get entrenched with your, you know, in battles with the worst aspects of both endeavors, if you will. But I really think that these ideas are interesting, and you should be able to discuss them in the middle. And a big part of it is, you know, if you have an agenda, to evaluate that. Like if it comes out there's no evidence, I throw my hands up. I'm like, wow, I really am shocked, but I'm wrong. Or if new evidence comes down the pike that proves something else, it's like, you know, will more scientists say, wow, maybe there's some ideas here that we consider mythological that has a basis in reality. So that's where I'm coming from. And believe me, I'm the dude who like actually believes that there were androgynous gods that showed up around the planet. And believe, what does that mean? I just like, you know, we talked when I spoke in your class, and it's like these, you can just look at the iconography and the descriptions and what they brought, and all these attributes. And I can't prove it in one way, but I'm really, you know, so I'm from the lunatic fringe as a goodwill ambassador. And I am not somebody who is just right down the middle by any means, but I am savvy enough to know that I can't just cook up a bullshit conspiracy, that it has to be verified by science. So the evidence is there. You know, you bring it to professionals, and that was kind of my final takeaway. I do know how like the Giant Show had some of that woo-woo stuff in it, but we did a series of Roanokes, and I thought they were very good. And there was just a parade of, we had Charles Ewan, skeptic, we had anthropologists, archaeologists, geologists, historians, Native Americans, and it was, both episodes I thought were great. And it was the antithesis of what History Channel usually kicks out, which is, you know, a lot of dreck. And so I felt like this is the kind of show I think that would bring in both sides who would be interested. And that's kind of I mean, there were a lot of interesting subjects like elongated skulls and lost worlds and things like that. And I just think, I hope there are a fair amount of people interested in these subjects who will see that a dialogue like this is constructive.
Well, what should we talk about next time?
How about Atlantis?
Well, that's too big. I mean, you're gonna talk about whatever you want to talk about anyway. You're gonna talk about Roanoke no matter what the topic is. So what about Atlantis? Because like you give me these assignments, and so I like I'd have to take my lunch break to like try to figure out what I'm gonna say because like you do this stuff all the time. I don't. So
We'll think on it.
okay, he's got to give me something so that I'm a little prepared. Like I think the links between the catastrophism, the Younger Dryas, and Atlantis are interesting, but I think there's some sleight of hand going on there. To be honest with you, with the timing, so I'm happy to talk about that. We can talk about. You said that there's sources, pre and post Plato sources, but you got to give me some names first so I can see whether I believe you or not before you just start throwing them at me. You're shaking your head. Of course, I'm not going to believe you.
Well, I won't leave you in the lurch. If we're going to talk about something, I have a PhD in Atlantology and giantology, but I will give you information so we can discuss it and you can give your take. And frankly, at some point, I want to talk about the fish gods, and I'll give you like a segment of like 40 minutes where I like at the talk I did, but I've expanded that, and there's more fish gods and more androgyny and more weirdness. And I just really, as like somebody who's curious, but as an academic background, I want you to evaluate it, and I would like other academics to evaluate it. Even Carl Sagan said that these myths of these bizarre androgynous fish gods should be looked at and analyzed more. So I really, and it's not just it was passed around traditions around the Mediterranean. It is in the Inuit people in Greenland. It's in North and South America, on and on and on. So that's the kind of stuff I just find interesting, and I think it's healthy to get somebody's take. Like, do you really think this could be beyond coincidence? Blah blah blah. So those are the ideas I like to throw at you. But before we figure out what we want to talk about next, we'll go back and forth so you can delve into my dark mind and see the contents of it and evaluate what you think.
Yeah, I'm sure Carl Sagan had somebody in mind exactly like you to finally solve this mystery for all of us.
You have. I'm the perfect guy because I don't give a shit, and I'm psychotic, right? And I got no social life, and so I'm the perfect guy to take on this mystery.
The right man for the job. Anyway,
Carl says, "What school offers a degree in giants? Missed a bunch of this. Hope you report."
That's my friend Heather. Hi, Heather. No, you have to attend the Jim Vieira School of Giantology, which I guess I'm matriculating at, and I didn't even know it.
I got my degree from Trump University before it shut down.
All I got was some steaks. Anyway, yeah, so we can do something on Atlantis. I think the catastrophism stuff is good. That's kind of hot. Elongated skulls, sure. There's something I was going to say right then. Oh, we do need to talk on record about the whole double rows of teeth thing, because I feel like I still haven't kind of penetrated all the way into your psyche about how much of that I think that explains. Because I did. I watched a talk of yours like a couple years ago, and like you're still busting out the double rows of teeth all over the place.
Did I? Well, we could talk about the Augustus Mitchell, that whole. Yeah, no, we'll talk about it. We could start off talking about that next time. And what
if you want, whatever.
Well, no, I do. Well, I guess we could address it right now. Like, anyways, Andy brought up the point that there's all these accounts of double rows of teeth in the historical literature, and he's saying it could be parlance of the time, like double jointed, double rows of teeth. And I said that's an interesting take, because you don't find those accounts in the British Isles. You find jawbones over the face, but you don't find double rows of teeth. But then I looked at different accounts, like the Smithsonian one, where Augustus Mitchell on Amelia Isle finds like a third set of teeth growing in, and there seems to be hypodontia mixed in and stuff like that. So I guess maybe I went into my old whatever mode, because mostly I believe that there's some truth to this idea of balance of the time. And then there seems to be maybe something else going on where it could be like interbreeding, causing like dental anomalies. But you can give your take.
Yeah, just real quick, like I mean, I think there's always a possibility for some real anomalies, but I figured there were two things going on. One was the double rows of teeth, which is a way of saying they had, you know, an upper row and a bottom row, because if you look at dental health from the time, especially of the Euro-American colonists, like it was horrible. So they were actually just remarking upon all these teeth, you know, were in place and they look good and there's a double row of teeth. And you can find examples of that in newspapers at the time where they're talking about like Teddy Roosevelt and his double rows of teeth, you know, and all that. And this dog had a double row of teeth. Like they're using it to describe the upper and the lower rows of teeth. Now, there are some accounts that don't follow that same verbiage, and those are kind of interesting. And the other thing was double teeth, which double teeth are molars because they have two roots. And so there's like a folk classification of teeth, your single teeth, which are your incisors, and your canines, which have one root, and then your double teeth in the back, which have two roots. And the reason there's an important distinction because before Novocaine and before dental surgery, if you went to have a double tooth removed, you were in bad shape because they could not put any kind of anesthetic on that. And it was not only painful, you had people dying because they would just yank these things out of there. You know, they'd strap you to the chair. So that folk classification goes away, interestingly, like if you look at the history of dentistry, and once they get Novocaine and you know, dentistry becomes a thing in the late 1800s, people stop talking about it. But they were calling them double teeth because they're also known as your grinders, and so they would get worn flat back there. And so when you have people who have a mouthful of teeth that are worn all the way around, they're saying they have double teeth in front as well as double teeth in back. So they were basically classifying them based on what they look like. And when you look at populations that are hunter-gatherers, especially where they have a really abrasive diet, you often find advanced tooth wear where the teeth are worn all the way around, worn flat, because they're not getting a lot of caries, they're not losing those teeth, they're kind of using them until they're worn all the way down. You can find examples of that in newspaper too. So double teeth all around, double teeth and then the other one, which is the double rows of teeth. And so I think that explains a lot of those cases. I don't think it explains all of them. There are still a few out there that like don't match that pattern, which might be interesting.
Well, I like that description that you gave. I never really saw it originally, and then I think eventually, I don't know, when we talked to something, you'd said, "Oh, read my stuff about double rows of teeth," because when I first came up with all these accounts of double rows of teeth, I'm like, I was told they're all hoaxes, and I was like, hoaxes? That doesn't make sense. They're all buried obscurely in all these documents around the country, like town and county histories. So that got me really entrenched. Like I'm catching a bunch of heat, but I'm not wrong, right? Because they're not hoaxes. But the fact that, you know, but it could be something else. That's why the jawbone of the face is so compelling to me. I really can't come up with an explanation other than a large jawbone. So that's a good way. That's like a novel way to look at it. Oh, it's parlance of the time, and I hear what you're saying, and that's you know, it could be mystery solved, which would be cool because even if it doesn't fall in the way of the giantologist, it's like evaluating these mysteries and coming up with solutions for them.
All right, that's cool. Well, we'll talk amongst ourselves after this is over, and we'll come up with another topic, and maybe do it again when we both have a evening on our schedule. Right? You're coming back? Do I have to find another host, another co-host? Another guy named Jim. I'm sure I know at least one. Come on.
Yes, we'll ruminate and work on how to fix the audio feedback problem. I think it's a good discussion, and once again, I think I represent a lot of what most people would consider controversial ideas, and I haven't been murdered or silenced, so I don't think there's a vast conspiracy to squash these ideas. I just think people have to understand how their preferences are weaponized. I'm just going to say it again. I think that's a really important thing. Like all the things you're interested is basically, put into an algorithm that fires back at you and gets you deeper down a rabbit hole sometimes, or entrenches your beliefs on one side or the other of an argument. I just don't think that's a healthy disposition. It leads to like a lack of respect for people. And, I think it's good just to understand that, I'm an economist. I could, talk about M2 money supply and all the jargon and, run loops around people like that. And it's like, that's not the way to go about it. You get, respect people's opinion, even if they are diluted by misinformation. Most people want to believe in something. They want to, feel like the world makes sense to them. And sometimes conspiracies make sense because the world is so screwed up and they get this numb comfort out of it. So I really, I'm a wise ass, but I don't want to really be like dumping on anyone because it'd be hypocritical. Because I've been a skeptic. I've been atheist. I've been a true believer. I've been all over the place and have reflected on my, ideas and how they change based on, evaluation of new evidence or just a sober, objective look at things. So, that's the larger message I would say is that these are cool ideas. They should be interesting and fun and debatable. And you should be honest about if there's any dark history around them as well. But I think this, this is how you solve problems, not by, claiming conspiracies that don't exist or something like that.
And that is why you're my life coach.
Exactly.
All right. Sounds good, man. I'm going to close it off here. Let's see if there are any. Carl wants us to talk about elongated skulls because then he can comment at a higher rate. So I'm sure we will get to that. We could even have we could have other people on too. Like we could invite somebody in because I think with this free version of the software, like you can have up to 6. So we could have like 4 guests. The 3 of them could be Hugh, and then whoever the 4th one is.
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan. Good one. Okay. All right. So, all right, shithead. Guess I'll see you later. Like this music?
Pretty dope.
You know who wrote that? You're looking at him. I'm cutting you off. Bye.